The Neighbor Who Watched Me Sleep, true horror story. On my first night in the house, a suffocating unease kept me awake, every sound amplified in the darkness. At 2:30 a.m., a deliberate creak shattered the silence, and as I glanced at my cracked window, I caught a flicker of movement, a shadowy face staring straight at me from the darkness outside. Frozen in terror, I could only stare back, the horror of those eyes burning into me through the night. This happened when I was 23. My name's Marcus. I had just moved into a small one-bedroom apartment after finally saving up enough money to leave my parents' house. At first, everything felt perfect. Quiet building, friendly landlord, and the kind of independence I'd been craving. But all of that changed in ways I still have trouble even talking about. The first night I stayed there, I felt an unusual tension in the air, a kind of heaviness that seemed to press down on me as I lay in bed. The room was silent, yet it felt alive with an unsettling energy. I remember lying in bed and feeling like something was off. It was as if the shadows in the room were whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear, secrets that made my skin crawl. I shrugged it off as nerves, convincing myself it was just the stress of moving to a new place. But around 2:30 in the morning I woke up to a faint creak. It was a sound that sliced through the silence like a knife, not the normal old building kind of creak. This sounded like a deliberate floorboard shift. It was as if someone was carefully stepping, trying not to be heard, yet failing to mask their presence. My window was slightly open, and through the faint glow of the streetlight outside I could swear I saw movement. The shadows seemed to dance, forming shapes that played tricks on my mind. I froze. My blinds weren't fully shut, just tilted. The gap was small, but it was enough to let in the chilling sight of what lay beyond. And in that gap there was the unmistakable outline of a face. Someone was watching me from outside my own window. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I shot up, yanked the blinds down, and rushed to the window. My mind raced with questions. Who could it be? What did they want? The fear was palpable, a living thing that gripped me tightly. But by the time I pulled them back up, the street below was empty. The night was still, the streetlights casting long shadows on the deserted pavement. It was as if the figure had vanished into thin air, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts in the eerie silence of the night. I told myself it was a trick of my imagination, but the next morning I looked outside on the fire escape before leaving for work. I noticed cigarette butts right under my window, brand I didn't smoke. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. I'd catch my blinds slightly shifted open when I was sure I'd close them. At night, I'd hear faint scratching at the window frame. Once I woke up drenched in sweat because I thought I heard whispering, slow, drawn-out words I couldn't make out. One night I came home from a late shift and saw my downstairs neighbor, a thin guy in his 40s named Carl, leaning on the railing, smoking. His eyes tracked me the whole way up. When I greeted him, he just smirked and said, "Sleep well tonight." That's when I started realizing it was him. It was exactly 1 week after the last incident when I was jolted awake in the dead of night. The room was pitch black, and the only sound was the faint ticking of my alarm clock, which read 4 o'clock a.m. At first I thought maybe I'd just had a bad dream, but then I heard it, a soft, unmistakable scraping noise coming from my window. My heart started pounding in my chest as I realized someone was actually outside. I froze, barely daring to breathe, straining my ears to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Suddenly my blinds shifted ever so slightly, and a pale, trembling hand slowly pushed its way through the narrow gap. The sight sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Someone was actually trying to break into my apartment right before my eyes in the middle of the night. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I let out a scream as loud as I could, hoping to scare the intruder away or at least alert my neighbors. My hands scrambled for anything I could use to defend myself, and I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy bedside lamp. With all my strength, I hurled it at the window, aiming for the shadowy figure trying to climb in. The lamp crashed against the window frame, making a loud, jarring noise. The blinds bent under the force, and the hand vanished instantly, yanked back through the gap. I heard the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps pounding down the metal fire escape outside my window, fading quickly into the night. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights illuminating the street outside my building. They took my statement, asking me to describe everything I saw and heard. I told them about the hand, the blinds, and the footsteps running away. The officers went straight to Carl's unit, since he was already a person of interest. They knocked on his door several times, but there was no answer. Without more concrete evidence, there wasn't much else they could do that night. I was left feeling shaken, frustrated, and more uneasy than ever. 2 nights later, I was lying in bed with every light in the apartment on. I hadn't been able to sleep. Around 3 a.m., I glanced toward my closet, and my blood ran cold. The door, which I always kept shut, was slightly open, and from the darkness inside I heard the faintest sound of breathing. I bolted out of the apartment barefoot, sprinting down the hall and pounding on my landlord's door. By the time police searched, the closet was empty. No forced entry, nothing stolen, just the closet door ajar. I moved out that week. I never saw Carl again, but to this day, when I close my eyes, I swear I can feel the weight of someone's eyes on me in the dark. Real horror doesn't need monsters, just people. What did you find the creepiest in this story? Please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more twisted, true horror stories from Sites of Horror. The basement smell, what lurks below. The first time I noticed it, I was walking down the basement stairs in the dark, barefoot, when the smell hit me. Sour, rotting, like something left in the sun for weeks. I froze halfway down, heart pounding, because mixed in with that stench was the sound of something dripping, slowly, steadily, from the other side of the basement wall. This story took place when I was 31 years old, a time in my life when everything felt new and uncertain. My name's Derek. Back then I was settling into a new chapter with my wife and our newborn daughter. We'd just moved into a modest duplex on a quiet street. It wasn't glamorous or fancy, but it was the first place that truly felt like ours. We were excited, hopeful, and maybe a little nervous about what the future would bring. The unit next to us was occupied, but not by a family. Instead, there was just a single older man named Harold. He lived alone and kept to himself, barely acknowledging us when we crossed paths. In fact, he seemed to go out of his way to avoid any interaction at all. It was almost as if he wanted to be invisible. From the very beginning, something about Harold made me uneasy. His blinds were always drawn tight, blocking out any glimpse inside. Packages would pile up on his doorstep untouched for days, and he never answered the door when anyone knocked. The oddest thing, though, was his routine. He only ever took his garbage out in the dead of night, when the rest of the neighborhood was asleep. But as strange as all of that was, nothing could have prepared me for the smell that started to seep through the walls. That was when things truly began to feel wrong. At first it was faint, a sour, rotting odor that seemed to seep up from the basement stairs, the kind of smell that makes the back of your throat tighten. I assumed maybe an animal had gotten trapped under the floorboards, but as weeks passed, the smell got stronger. One night around 11, the power flickered out. The whole house was suddenly swallowed by darkness, the kind that makes every sound seem louder and every shadow stretch longer. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence, heart thumping, before grabbing my flashlight. I headed to the basement to check the breaker, each step creaking under my weight. The air grew colder as I descended, and the beam of my flashlight barely cut through the thick shadows clinging to the walls. As soon as I stepped inside, the odor slammed into me, so strong it felt almost physical, like a wall I had to push through. It wasn't just rot anymore. It was chemical, too. Something sharp and artificial, mixed with the sickly sweet stench of decay, sweet and putrid all at once. My stomach lurched, and I had to fight the urge to gag. I'd never smelled anything like it before. That's when I noticed it, something I hadn't seen before, hidden in the gloom. A faint trail of dark stains on the concrete floor, leading from Harold's side of the basement toward a locked door. The stains looked old, but there was something fresh about them too, as if whatever caused them hadn't stopped. I went upstairs fast, shut the door, and told my wife what I'd seen and smelled, my voice shaking. She begged me not to get involved. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she kept glancing toward the basement door as if something might come up after us, told me to just leave it alone. But I couldn't. The thought of that smell, those stains, kept gnawing at me. That smell had gotten inside my head. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything else. The next night I waited until I saw Harold drive away. The house felt even emptier, the silence heavier. Then I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar. My hands were shaking, but I knew I had to see what was behind that door. The locked door was old wood, warped and splintered, paint peeling from years of neglect. One hard push, and the frame splintered, the sound echoing through the basement like a gunshot. I braced myself for what I might find inside. Inside, plastic sheets covered the floor, buckets filled with bleach leaned against the wall, and on a long workbench, knives, a hacksaw, and glass jars lined neatly in a row. Inside those jars floated pieces of flesh, pale, swollen, suspended in cloudy liquid. I gagged, dropped the flashlight, and scrambled to pick it up. When the beam rolled across the room, it hit something else, a large freezer. I didn't open it, I didn't need to. My heart was pounding as I bolted upstairs, barely able to breathe. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the police, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what I'd seen and heard in that basement. Every second felt like an eternity as I waited for them to arrive, terrified that Harold might come back up those stairs at any moment. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights painting the neighborhood in red and blue. They searched the basement thoroughly, weapons drawn, and within the hour they arrested Harold right there that same night. The relief was overwhelming, but it was mixed with a deep, gnawing fear about what they might find. As the investigation unfolded, the truth became even more horrifying. It turned out Harold had been killing animals for years, and according to what the detectives later revealed, there was evidence he may have experimented on people too. They found bones, far too many to identify, some old, some disturbingly fresh. The basement was a graveyard. My wife and I couldn't bear to stay another day. We packed up our things and moved out the very next month, desperate to leave those memories and that house behind us forever. But even after we left, there's one part of that night that never leaves me. It haunts my dreams and creeps into my thoughts when I least expect it. As the police were walking Harold out in handcuffs, he paused, turned his head, and looked right at me, his eyes locked onto mine, and then he smiled, a cold, knowing smile that sent chills down my spine, and then in a low, almost playful whisper he said, "You should have just ignored the smell." Those words echo in my mind to this day, a chilling warning I'll never forget. If that story sent a chill down your spine, there's more where that came from. Subscribe to Sites of Horror, where your nightmares find a home.